Hi, friend. Welcome back to Running to Myself. I'm your host, Trisha Stanton. Today, I want to tell you a simple story, a very ordinary story, one that happens right down the road from my house. And like most of the stories that end up teaching me the most, it didn't start out as a lesson. It started out as a thought I kept repeating and a feeling I kept practicing. There's a pond down the road from us. I pass it every single time I leave my neighborhood. And every single time I pass it, especially over the last couple of years, I say the same thing out loud. Look how low the water is. I feel so bad for the ducks. We need rain so badly. If someone in the car is with me, they get to hear this commentary. And if I'm alone, I still say it to myself. We've been in a drought for a few years now. And the pond, it looks different than it used to. The water line is pulled back. The edges are all exposed. It doesn't look like the full, lush pond that I remember when we first moved here. And every time I noticed it, I felt this wave of sadness. Sad for the ducks, sad for the geese, sad for the wildlife that had to live there. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was rehearsing that sadness over and over again. Here's what was happening. I'd see the pond and I'd think, this is bad. This isn't enough. They're struggling. And then I'd feel sad. And because I felt sad, I assumed that the thought must be true. Now that's important. We often believe a thought simply because it produces a feeling, as if emotion is evidence. But emotion is not evidence. It is just information about what we're thinking. One day, I was alone in the car, same drive, same pond, same low water. But this time, a different thought floated in. They have wings. I actually laughed a little. They don't have to stay there. They aren't stuck. They are not trapped in this pond the way I had imagined all of those times. And then another thought followed. They don't actually need very much water to swim. You've probably seen this too, birds bathing in puddles, just standing water in a driveway, temporary little pools that appear after a rain. Just because I measure fullness one way doesn't mean it's unusable to them. Then a few days later, I walked past that pond and I noticed something I hadn't noticed before. All the ducks were gathered in one area. They were happily swimming, moving around, doing duck things, and then beyond them, there was plenty of water left. Water they weren't even using. The pond isn't empty. It isn't barren. It just doesn't look the way I think it should look. And then suddenly, that sadness disappeared. Not because the pond changed, not because the drought ended, but because my story changed. And that's when it hit me. All that sadness I'd been feeling was never about the ducks. It was about the story that I was telling about the ducks. I had projected my interpretation onto them. I had decided what low meant. I had decided what enough looked like. And the ducks, well, they never agreed to that story. Isn't that interesting? After this, I started to ask myself a new question. Where else am I doing this in my life? Where else am I feeling sad, discouraged, frustrated, or stuck, not because of facts, but because of the story I'm telling about the facts? So here's where I want us to pause and go a little deeper, because this is one of the most powerful mindset tools that I know. Thoughts are just sentences in your brain. They feel real, they sound convincing, but they are not automatically true. Facts are neutral. They can be proven. They would hold up in a court of law. The pond water level is lower than it was 3 years ago. That's a fact. The ducks are suffering. That's a thought. And once I could see the difference, everything shifted. So let's consider for a moment why this matters. You see, we don't suffer because of facts. We suffer because of the meaning that we assign to them. We suffer because of the conclusions that we draw, the assumptions we make, the stories we repeat, and the more we repeat a story, the more real it feels. Just like I practiced sadness every time I drove past that pond. Here are some common places where we do this. You might recognize some. You see someone pull away and you think, I'm too much. That's a thought. You're not invited and you think, I don't belong. That's a story. Progress feels slow and you think, I'm behind. That is an interpretation. Energy is low and you think, something is wrong with me. It's not a fact. These thoughts feel true because they hurt. But hurt does not equal truth. Listen, being able to separate thoughts from facts is a superpower. Not because it makes life easy, not because it removes pain, but because it gives you choice. Choice to pause, choice to question, choice to soften the story. Here's something that you can try this week. When you notice a heavy feeling, sadness, frustration, discouragement, ask yourself, what am I thinking right now? Then ask, is this a fact or is this a story? You don't have to change it. You don't have to replace it with a positive thought. Just notice. Sometimes awareness alone loosens the grip. It's time to go back to the pond. The water is still low. The drought hasn't magically ended. But I no longer feel sad for the ducks because I see them differently now. And this reminds me, life might not look full by your old measurements, but that doesn't mean that it's empty. It doesn't mean you're failing. It doesn't even mean that you're stuck. Your mind is powerful, and the stories that you tell yourself, they shape how you feel. So the next time you feel yourself feeling heavy, pause and ask, is this a fact or is this just a story that I've been practicing? Thanks for being here, friend. Until next time, keep running to yourself.